Karen assaulted my pregnant wife over a badge. I'm the state's top prosecutor. There's something about watching your pregnant wife get slapped in broad daylight that redefines what justice means. It's not just a concept in a courtroom. It's not a closing argument. It's a moment, a single, brutal moment where you either stay silent or you stand up and burn everything down to protect what's yours. I chose the latter. We moved to Redberry Glen for peace, for family, for air that didn't taste like politics or subpoenas. My name is Thomas Keller. I'm 43. I've served as the state prosecutor for the past 7 years. You might have heard of me if you follow criminal justice reform or if you've read headlines involving political racketeers, housing scams, or the parole board shakeup of 2020. That was me. But here in Redberry Glen, nobody knew, or so I thought. My wife Ava is the stronger one. 6 months pregnant, hyperemesis survivor, second trimester glow, barely hiding the bruises on her ribs from months of vomiting and restless sleep. She'd always wanted a place with a garden, someplace quiet. And when we saw the cream-colored townhomes with big magnolia trees and community first stamped on every welcome packet, it felt right. We didn't know the community had a self-appointed queen. Her name was Karen Whitlock, and her kingdom was built on paper signs and fear. The first sign came a week after we moved in, literally a sign duct taped to our door. Priority parking is for approved members. Fake badges will be reported. Ava found it. She thought it was a mistake. We laughed it off, but I knew better. I'd seen that kind of wording in false municipal citations, in eviction rackets, in grifts that prey on the unaware. Approved members. That's not how civil code works. We asked the management company. They shrugged and said the HOA was resident-led and not officially certified, but active. Translation rogue. I should have pulled us out then. But Ava said, let's just lay low. We only need 6 months. Then we'll move to the city for the baby's delivery. So we stayed. The real confrontation began at the grocery drop-off zone. Redberry Glen has a small, reserved area near the clubhouse marked expectant mother and medical access parking. It's not official handicap, it's courtesy-based. Most people respect it. Ava parked there on a Friday morning. She had groceries in the back seat. Her prenatal badge was clipped clearly to her shirt, and she moved slowly, hands on her belly, weight shifting gently with each step. That's when Karen struck. She stormed up, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched high on her forehead like horns. This is not your spot, Karen hissed. Ava turned, confused. I'm pregnant. I have a registered prenatal badge. We got approval from the building manager. Karen leaned forward, eyes sharp. You don't look like you need help. A lot of women milk this whole pregnancy thing. My wife's hand dropped to her belly. I'm 6 months. I have medical clearance. I've seen women bigger than you jog to Pilates. Karen snapped. Then, without warning, she slapped Ava's badge hard. The metal clip ripped free from her shirt. The badge flew to the pavement. Ava staggered back, clutching her stomach. That's when I stepped out of the car. I had watched everything from 30 feet away. I'd just returned from a late deposition and pulled into the adjacent space. I saw the slap, saw Ava's eyes go wide, saw Karen sneer like she had power. And I moved fast. Not like a prosecutor, like a husband. Get away from her, I said, voice low. Karen stepped back, not in fear, but in entitlement. You can't park here. She's abusing the system. These spots are for certified uses. Not what I asked. Not women like my wife. Not women who had to be hospitalized twice in this pregnancy. Not women carrying my child. She smirked. Pregnancy doesn't make you disabled. No, but it sure as hell doesn't make you God. Neighbors had started to gather. One woman had her phone out, recording. A man in gym shorts stood silently, watching. Karen turned to the crowd. This is exactly the kind of chaos that happens when people don't respect HOA rules. I stepped between her and Ava. I'm Thomas Keller, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. State prosecutor. That slap, that's battery. and your clipboard. That's impersonation of legal authority. And I'm not just going to file a report. I'm going to expose every single fraudulent policy you've enforced on this block. Her eyes widened for the first time. She backed up a step. You're bluffing. I looked her dead in the face. Try me. That night, Ava cried in the shower. Not because of the slap, because of the humiliation. She called me fake. She whispered. She made me feel like I wasn't worthy of being taken seriously, like I didn't look like a real pregnant woman. I sat beside the tub. My anger had turned into something sharper purpose. I'd brought down state senators. Karen Whitlock didn't know who she was dealing with. The next morning, I went to work not to the courtroom, but to war. I started digging. Karen's so-called HOA had no filing status with the Secretary of State. No bylaws posted, no voting logs, no formal election, no legal right to collect dues. She'd created the entire system through printed forms and fake council minutes. She was running a fake HOA, and I knew the penalties. False legal authority, Class A misdemeanor. Fraudulent fee collection, felony if proven over $500. Harassment with physical contact. That slap meant a chargeable assault. She had no idea how deep she'd gone, and I was going to bury her with her own paperwork. Karen Whitlock thought her clipboard was a shield. She had no idea it was a weapon in my hands. I've spent most of my career taking down people who hide behind fake authority. Elected officials laundering money through veterans nonprofits, landlords forging eviction letters with city letterhead, a former police captain who ran an illegal tow racket for 5 years before someone finally pulled the thread. Karen. She was a miniature version of all of them, wrapped in petty rage and neighborhood politics. But what she lacked in power, she made up for in audacity. Ava tried to shake it off, but the incident had done something to her, something I couldn't fix with flowers or apologies. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. She slapped the badge like it meant nothing. Ava told me one night as she sat at the kitchen table, slowly peeling an orange, like I was faking everything, like I had to prove my body was enough. She'd worn that prenatal badge like armor. After years of fertility treatments, one miscarriage, and endless hospital visits, finally being recognized as a high-risk pregnancy was a validation. Karen had taken that and crushed it literally. I filed the battery report the next day. I did it by the book, through the local precinct, not my office. Conflict of interest would have been too easy for her to use against me. Detective Harris, the officer on duty, nodded when I explained. Whitlock, he said, "Oh, yeah. We've had calls, noise complaints, harassment, but no one ever followed through. She's slippery. Not anymore." I said, "I started with public records. Karen's HOA had no official filing, no 501c4, no incorporation as a nonprofit, no tax ID number. She had never submitted any of the legally required minutes to the city. In fact, the last legitimate HOA for Redberry Glen had been dissolved in 2014, but Karen had filled the void. Her council included 3 people: her sister, who lived out of state, a friend who had since moved to Arizona, and a man named George Klein, who was currently incarcerated for check fraud. That didn't stop Karen from listing them in printed newsletters as board members. She ran her operation through threats and intimidation, printed infractions, mailed warning letters, claimed to have legal jurisdiction over landscaping violations and trash bin placement. She even sent invoices, actual invoices. I called 4 neighbors who'd received them. One elderly couple had paid over $700 in compliance fees. She said she could have us evicted. The husband told me, "We didn't want trouble." That was the common thread. They were all afraid of trouble. I decided to give them a reason not to be. I knocked on doors, not as a prosecutor, as a neighbor, as a husband. I wore jeans and a plain t-shirt. I told them what happened to Ava, showed them a photo of the badge, now crumpled and bent. I told them Karen slapped it clean off her maternity shirt, that her handprint had lingered red on Ava's chest. Some of them cried, others got quiet. But one by one, they began to speak. She fined me for putting a swing on my porch. She told me I couldn't hang a wreath that wasn't seasonally approved. She threatened to tow my car for being parked 3 inches past the curb. She said I was lowering property values for wearing my hair bonnet outside. I gathered sworn affidavits, 7 in the first 24 hours. By the end of the week, I had 19. Then the moment that changed everything, Tanya, a young mother who lived across from the clubhouse, texted me a clip. I caught the slap on camera. I wasn't sure if I should show you. It was grainy but clear. Karen, the slap, Ava recoiling, me rushing forward, Karen shouting about rules. It wasn't just battery. It was public battery of a pregnant woman wearing a medical ID badge. I called Detective Harris. I've got the tape. I told him. He watched it. Then called the city prosecutor's office. That same day, a warrant was signed for Karen's arrest on charges of misdemeanor battery, impersonation of a legal authority, and harassment. Word spread fast. The next morning, Karen posted printed flyers on every mailbox. Don't believe the lies. Certain people are trying to destroy this community for their own gain. Underneath, she'd taped a blurry photo of me speaking with residents on the sidewalk. She's spiraling, Ava said softly. I nodded. That means she's scared. Later that day, Karen confronted me in the community garden. You think because you wear a suit in a courthouse, you're better than the rest of us, she snapped. No, I said calmly. But I do understand the law, which you've been breaking for years. I have the right to preserve standards. No, you've been faking power and extorting neighbors, and now the state knows? She leaned in close, lowering her voice. Do you know what happens when people like you start witch hunts? They get burned too. I didn't move. You've already lit the match. Karen, neighbors started coming forward publicly. People who had never spoken at meetings. People who didn't know they had rights. One woman came forward and admitted Karen had threatened to call CPS when her toddler screamed during bath time. Another admitted Karen had once slapped a package from her hands for cluttering the entryway. I helped them organize. I helped them file. The media caught wind. A fake HOA in suburbia. Pregnant woman assaulted by self-appointed president. Read one headline. Karen was furious. But now, the press had her number. They started digging too. Her LinkedIn profile falsified. Claimed to have a legal degree, no records supported it. Her HOA documents proven forged through mismatched city seals and outdated zoning codes. Karen had built her house of cards with glue sticks and threats. Now it was time to blow. I prosecuted gang leaders, corrupt judges, and men who thought the law was a joke until it strangled them. But never had I seen a case unravel like this, where the entire system of abuse was built on fake paper, fear, and unchecked arrogance. Karen wasn't just a rogue neighbor. She was a full-blown con artist. And Redberry Glen. It had been her stage for years. Now the spotlight was on, and she was starting to sweat. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Karen was in her yard, still wearing her HOA sash. Yes, a literal sash she'd started wearing since the media attention started. She was planting artificial tulips in straight rows when two officers approached. I watched from across the street. Ava by my side, Karen Whitlock, the lead officer, announced, "You are under arrest for battery, harassment, impersonation of municipal authority, and suspected fraud. Please place your hands behind your back." "You can't be serious," she shrieked. "I'm the president of this community. This is harassment. This is law," the officer replied calmly. "Let's go." She looked around wildly, expecting support, but the street was quiet. Even her closest allies stayed inside. She went down screaming, "This is political. This is a witch hunt. You'll all regret this." But the only thing anyone regretted was not speaking out sooner. Later that week, I sat down with the assistant city prosecutor, Mariah Lentz. She was assigned to handle Karen's case independently of my office. "This isn't just about battery," she told me. "We've identified over 20 checks deposited into a personal account labeled HOA General Fund. No EIN, no municipal tie. We're talking thousands." "Rico?" I asked. She nodded. If we can link two or more people in a conspiracy, possibly, but for now, it's mail fraud, false impersonation, and unlicensed collections, enough to bury her, and the residents. We'll push for restitution, she paused, looking over her notes. You've built a solid wall here. Thomas, you didn't just stand up for your wife, you lit a match under the whole system. Just as we were preparing for her pretrial hearing, Karen filed a counter motion, not just any motion, one claiming legal immunity as a recognized municipal agent. It was absurd, but it got a court date. She cited a document signed in 2018 by a former city clerk, someone she claimed approved the reactivation of the Redberry Glen HOA under her leadership. I knew the name, Mark Haney. He'd been forced to resign after a bribery investigation. I requested access to the full document. When I saw it, my stomach turned. It looked real. Seal, signature, stamp. But the zoning code listed didn't even exist in 2018. And the ordinance number she cited belonged to an old fire escape safety clause from the 90s. She'd forged it, and I could prove it. Ava stood with me outside the courtroom the day we presented evidence. She was wearing the same maternity badge Karen had slapped weeks ago now, bent, scratched, but pinned proudly to her dress. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. "I've been ready since the moment you told me what she did." The hearing was short but electric. Karen arrived in a business suit 2 sizes too tight and carried a folder labeled Community Preservation Authority. She tried to smile for the cameras. Inside the courtroom, she made her arguments herself, fired her attorney, said she trusted her own legal instincts. She called herself a guardian of neighborhood values. I listened, letting her talk herself into a corner. Then the prosecutor stood, handed over my analysis, and called an expert witness, a city official who verified the document Karen had submitted was not only forged, but copied directly from a publicly available PDF used in zoning training sessions. Karen's face paled. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Whitlock, you are not a legal representative of any entity within the city of Ashton. You have no authority. You never did." The media feasted. Fake HOA president faces felony charges. Neighborhood tyrant used forged documents. Slapped pregnant woman state prosecutor exposes community scam from inside. The interviews rolled in, but I only gave one to a small podcast on local housing justice. I said this Karen was not unique. She's just the one who got caught. These fake HOAs, these systems of intimidation, they thrive in silence. And we need to be louder. The story wasn't about me. It was about Ava, about every person Karen had humiliated, and about every community wondering if their rules were built on real authority or the illusion of it. Days before the trial, Karen released a 17-page manifesto to the press, titled "I Was the Last Real American." It blamed immigrants. It blamed the media. It blamed women who weaponized femininity. And it blamed me. She said I was obsessed with controlling narrative. She said Ava was barely even showing and probably wearing a prosthetic belly for sympathy. The backlash was immediate. Residents began speaking to news outlets. Victims from other neighborhoods came forward. One woman claimed Karen had tried to start a compliance board in her old condo and had been forced out after she threatened a tenant with arrest over a Halloween decoration. Before the sentencing, Ava stood in court and read a statement. She was radiant, calm, her belly full and firm with the weight of the life we were protecting. She didn't just slap a badge, Ava said. She slapped a woman's right to exist in public without permission. She tried to shrink me, to silence me, to shame me. And for a moment, it worked. She paused. But that moment is over. Karen's empire didn't explode. It crumbled slowly, piece by piece, as if it finally realized no one believed in it anymore. And when the dust settled, Redberry Glen wasn't the same. It was better. The trial lasted 3 days. Karen represented herself. Her court demeanor veered between defiance and delusion. One moment she proclaimed she was protecting American standards, and the next she claimed to be the victim of deep state sabotage. She questioned every witness poorly. She claimed the video was doctored. She accused Ava of orchestrating the assault for media attention. She even tried to subpoena our unborn child's medical documentation. The jury was done in 4 hours. Guilty. Battery. Harassment of a vulnerable person. Impersonating a public official. Mail fraud, forgery of municipal documents. Unlawful collection of funds. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in state prison and restitution payments to every resident who had paid dues or fines to her fake HOA. She was also banned by civil injunction from managing or organizing any neighborhood association for the rest of her life. When they cuffed her in the courtroom, Karen turned to me one last time. "You think you won?" she hissed. I didn't answer. I just looked at Ava, who was rubbing her belly, her eyes steady and full of something Karen would never understand. Peace. The moment Karen was gone, the building's energy shifted. Neighbors who had avoided eye contact now invited us for backyard potlucks. People brought over baked goods, flowers, baby toys. A woman named Alondra, who Karen once threatened with fines for hanging prayer flags, showed up at our door with handmade blankets for the baby. We formed a real committee, not an HOA, but a resident wellness council. Its first rule: no one gets to speak for the whole unless everyone has a voice. I helped draft the charter, but I didn't lead. I didn't want to. Instead, I empowered others. A retired teacher named Miss Helen took the reins. She'd lived under Karen's rule for 6 years without ever knowing she had the right to question it. She made me feel like a tenant. Miss Helen told me, "You reminded me I'm a citizen." Ava wasn't the same either. She stopped apologizing for taking up space. She stopped asking if she looked pregnant enough or if she was asking for too much when she needed to sit down, take the elevator, or ask for help. She led a workshop at the local library called How to Spot a Fake HOA. Over 60 people showed up. It was covered by the local news. They called her the woman who took down the clipboard tyrant. Ava just laughed and said, "No, I just finally said no loud enough for others to hear." Within 2 months, over $18,000 had been returned to residents through court-ordered restitution. Some people used it to pay off overdue bills. Others donated it to the Resident Wellness Fund. The money Karen once used to control people now helped them breathe. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, who had nearly sold their home out of fear, decided to stay. "We're planting a garden," Mr. Collins told me. "First thing she ever told us was our shrubs were too wild. Now we're letting them grow." Even George from Unit 2B, who'd once been Karen's assistant, wrote a public apology and offered to volunteer on the new council. He said he'd been scared into silence and wanted to make it right. Forgiveness, it turns out, had a place in all this too. 3 weeks before Ava's due date, the community threw us a surprise baby shower. We walked into the clubhouse, yes, that clubhouse, and saw balloons, streamers, finger foods, and a giant card signed by nearly every resident in the neighborhood. The same space where Karen used to post her violation of the month poster was now a corkboard covered in family photos, dog selfies, community resources, and a flyer that said, "Every voice matters. No clipboards required." Ava cried. I nearly did too. The badge Karen slapped. It was framed in a shadow box on the gift table, surrounded by tiny onesies and teddy bears. Underneath it read, "She thought this badge was fake, but this child is real, and so is our strength." A month later, a national housing journal reached out to me for an interview. They were doing a feature on neighborhood abuse of power, and someone had forwarded them our story. They asked me, "What does it feel like to win something so personal?" In public, I said this. It wasn't about winning. It was about stopping the lie. The real threat to justice isn't crime. It's silence. And Karen thrived in silence. They asked what advice I had for other neighborhoods. I gave them 3 words: ask, check, challenge. Ask where authority comes from. Check the paperwork. Challenge the assumption that someone with a badge, real or fake, has power over your life. Hope Keller was born on a calm spring evening. 7 pounds, 10 ounces, loud lungs, big eyes. She came into the world surrounded by light, not fear. When the nurse clipped her little hospital ID to her blanket, I looked at it for a long time. Another badge, another truth. This one, no one could rip away. Justice doesn't always arrive in courtrooms or headlines. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the early morning light of a house no longer afraid, in the peace of an elevator ride without judgment, in a woman's steady breath as she holds her newborn daughter against her chest, free from shame, free from scrutiny. That's how I knew the story was over. Not when Karen was sentenced, but when Ava whispered to our daughter, "You're safe now." 6 months after Hope's birth, Redberry Glen looked nothing like the place we'd first moved into. The lawns were the same. The sidewalks hadn't changed. But the people, the energy completely transformed. Gone were the stiff smiles and cautious nods. People talked, asked questions, knocked on each other's doors not to report but to connect. The Resident Wellness Council hosted monthly town halls, potluck style, always ending with a question passed around. "What's one thing you used to be afraid to say here at the first meeting?" A teenager said. "I used to hide my pronouns," a mom whispered. "I thought I wasn't neighborly enough because I worked 2 jobs." An older man said, "I didn't know I could say no." That became the heartbeat of Redberry Glen. Saying no. No to fear, no to fake rules, no to silence. Karen's name no longer echoed through the halls, but her damage lived on in yellowed notices, still pinned to fridge doors, in rusted mailboxes labeled with made-up violation codes, in the voices of residents who still hesitated before saying what they really thought. We didn't erase her memory. We reclaimed it. At the spring fair, the children's art table displayed drawings about what community means, among rainbows and houses. One 6-year-old drew a woman with a clipboard yelling, and underneath it, "We don't listen to her anymore." No one laughed, but everyone nodded. At Hope's naming ceremony, Ava stood in the center of our courtyard with the same badge Karen had once slapped to the ground, now tucked inside a new shadow box beside Hope's hospital ID, a silver locket, and a poem Ava had written. "You'll be told to shrink, to hush, to sit smaller than you are. But my child, you were born from protest, and you will walk through every door." People clapped, but no one clapped louder than Miss Helen. Redberry Glen applied for a city grant to redesign its outdated community policy system. They asked me to help. I declined. Instead, I nominated 3 residents who'd once been targeted by Karen's fake HOA, a single mom, a retired veteran, a high school junior. They rewrote the rules not for control, but for care. No more threats of noncompliance, no more faux infractions, just simple principles. No one governs alone. No title is permanent. Every rule must be voted, reviewed, and posted clearly and respectfully. It was in passing. A grocery store parking lot. She didn't see me. She looked older, smaller. She was alone, fiddling with her keys. Her hair was pinned back. No clipboard, no HOA sash, no audience. For a second, I felt something unexpected. Not pity, not anger. Clarity. She tried to dominate her world by controlling others. And when the world stopped listening, she had nothing left. Power built on fear always collapses when the truth steps forward. And truth, especially in the hands of the people, doesn't whisper, it roars. To those reading this, I say this plainly. Karen didn't slap my wife's badge because she thought it was fake. She slapped it because she couldn't stand that someone else had a symbol of power she didn't control. Her story isn't unique. Fake HOAs, neighborhood tyrants, title holders with no legal standing but all the ego in the world, they thrive in silence, in hesitation, in people too tired, too polite, or too uncertain to push back. But here's what I've learned. You don't need a badge to hold the truth. You don't need a title to protect your people. You don't need permission to say no more. Have you ever been bullied by someone pretending to have power? Ever watched your community shrink under someone else's fear? Then speak, act, share. Your voice is stronger than their clipboard. Let's talk. What does your version of community justice look like? Have you seen fake authority rise and fall? Because if you have, you already know justice isn't something we wait for. It's something we build together.